everybody, and welcome to the second episode in our webinar series around leading through seismic change. I hope you're all keeping well. Thank you for checking in and joining us this morning. I trust you're all safe and healthy and managing to keep sane during these strange times. I think what's becoming increasingly evident is that this is not a marathon. This is going to be a sprint race. We're in this for the long run. I see government are now talking about a 6 to 8 month plan with respect to releasing the lockdown, which means we're in this for the long haul. And any notion of sort of a immediate return to what we had previously considered to be normal is perhaps somewhat naive at this stage. I think it's highly unlikely that we do return to normal. And so today we're taking a closer look at something slightly more pragmatic and hopefully useful for everyone at this stage, and that is remote working and working with remote teams and managing remote teams. I think today's episode probably won't be new for many people. Remote working has been common practice for quite some time for many people and many companies. However, it is new as well for equally many people. So we hope that while some of you might find this to be fairly common practice and well known, that at least there'll be some value for those who are still finding their feet with respect to remote working, and some of the subtle nuances with respect to things like performance management, communication, and all of those sorts of issues. I think, beyond the lockdown, what many companies and employees are realizing is that perhaps in many ways remote working is preferable to having to commute to an office and so on. And I think what we're going to find post-lockdown is that employee behavior and expectations have also been fundamentally changed. And there'll be more of a requirement and more of an expectation that employees are allowed to work at home. And so I think it's in all of our interest to really start understanding that space and getting better and better at it. I think companies have also realized that there are massive efficiencies to be gained, that employees can be more productive. It bodes very well, I think, for greater efficiency and reduced costs going forward for many companies. And so, this is the workplace of the future, but it's happening right now. And you either need to adapt or face an untimely demise, I suppose. But all of this does come with unique complexity. And so hopefully through our discussion today, we can start unpacking some of that and gain a better understanding. Okay, so a few housekeeping notes for today. So I'd like to encourage everyone, much like the previous webinars, to use the chat functionality. It's a fantastic way to ensure a very interactive engagement. So if you have any comments during the presentation, please feel free to just pop that over into chat, and we'll keep monitoring that and respond to them when possible. And also the Q&A functionality. So Q&A is slightly different in that the questions you pose there will remain there until answered. And so, if you have an issue you'd really like the panelists or anyone else to come back to, please just stick it into the Q&A instead, and we'll be able to manage it much better from there. As per previous webinars, if you'd like to engage the audience, please feel free to raise your hand, and I'll give you that opportunity to switch on your video as well as your audio and engage the broader audience. Okay, so on that note, our panelist today is Gail Sturgis. So Gail specializes in financial systems and business intelligence. She's consulted leaders on people, organization, and development and alignment, and has a specific focus on creating tomorrow's workforce today, which is why we thought, Gail would be the perfect panelist to take us through this today. Gail has a number of specialities, designing organizations for flexibility and growth, both in South Africa and broader Africa, designing careers to develop today and tomorrow's workforce, risk management through succession and workforce planning, new generation performance management. She's also the author of the Core Agile People Management Online Program. She's the co-author of the Remote Worker Management Online Program. She's a certified human capital strategist and a certified Agile People Coach. So certainly Gail is well qualified to take us through the subtleties of remote working, and I'm certainly looking forward to some of the insights we might get today. So on that note, Gail, over to you.
My topic for today is remote worker management, and I touch on 4 different areas, only one today. So the area we're touching on today is staying in touch. And in this new virtual world of ours, communication is key. Communication is one of the most important things that we have to look at. And it has to change. How we've been doing things has to change. So that's what we're talking about today. So why remote working? So as Ryan mentioned, it's not new. In fact, in 2019, something like 70% of global professionals were working remotely at least 1 day a week, and 53% at least half of the time. So it really isn't new, but something has happened now that has thrown us into a whole different sphere, a whole different way of doing things, and thrown us out of kilter in a big way. And that's, of course, the coronavirus. And that's put us all into working from home. So how do we do this? Businesses are suffering, and I've got some nice stats to show you right now. Business is suffering, but how do we actually work our way through this and get our way out of it? Because the alternative is closing down, and that's not going to do anybody any good. So this is a recent survey by Willis Towers Watson in South Africa. There were about 400, just over 400 participants in this. And by the way, they're repeating it again now, a month later.
Which you for a second. We are seeing the notes on your slides. So will you just share the slides only, so then it will maximize them? So if you'll just stop this share and then move to the full slides.
That better?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So this is from Willis Towers Watson. Previously, PE Corporate Services. Late last year, PE was merged with Willis Towers Watson. They're now known as Willis Towers Watson, South Africa. So this was a survey that they did in the last week of March, first week of April this year. And it showed some quite interesting things. As I was saying, they're doing it again right now. So when I get those results in one of our future episodes, I'll feed back these latest results to you as well. And by the way, if anybody'd like to participate, let Ryan know, and I will let Willis Towers Watson know so that they can send you a link to the survey. So 11% of organizations of the over 400 said that they're experiencing devastating impact. 47% severe impact. Interestingly though, 33% moderate impact and 9% low impact. And I'm going to be asking you that question in a minute. On a feasibility, so it was how feasible is it for you to have your employees working remotely? 15% said it's feasible for all their employees to work remotely. 18% said it's feasible for over 75% of the employees to work remotely. So that is 1/3 of the target audience can have most of their people working remotely with some degree of comfort. 44% said that only up to 25% of their workforce can work remotely. An interesting thing, well, I found it interesting, that 52% already had a work from home policy. My guess is that the work from home policy was geared for specific workers and not for the kind of situation that we have right now. So that'll be interesting to see how it changes. And then the cost savings that they're looking to apply. So 48% have got a hiring freeze. And 24% are doing selective retrenchments. They don't say how they're doing it, so don't know about that. And the other interesting statistic is 78% said that they pay for the home office provisioning for their staff. The next research came from Gartner. So this is a global research, and there were about 230 respondents to this particular research. 30% of their workers, of the respondents, workers said they were working at least part-time pre-COVID-19, and 41% say they're going to be working part-time post-COVID. So there is an expected increase, even early on. There is an expected increase already in people working remotely from home. So Ryan was saying, we're not going to go back. We're not going to go back. At the moment, 50% say 81% of the employees are now working remotely. That's globally, in the lockdown globally. And 15% say between 61 and 80. So 65% have the majority of their people working remotely at the moment. Two other interesting stats from the Gartner research is employee discretionary effort, the amount of discretionary effort that employees are putting into their work. Remote workers put in more discretionary effort than in-office workers. But in-office workers are 13 percentage points higher in terms of staying where they are. So although the remote workers are putting in more discretionary effort, they also have more opportunity to look around. So it's really important to look at how we engage and motivate those people to keep them on board with us. So my first question, and if you could pop it into the chat box, and when you do that, please won't you put it on to attendees and the panelists, so that everybody can share. What percentage of your workforce is working remotely, at least part-time, pre-COVID-19? And how do you think that's going to change post-COVID-19? Give a minute or so to look at that. So pre-COVID-19, Natalie, pre-COVID-19, 30%. Wow, post-COVID, at least 80%. That's enormous. Fabulous. Currently, my team is 40%, 20 of them. 30% pre, close to 100 post. Wow. Pre 20%, post close to 100. So you see, we are getting this move, and I just had the feeling that we're not going to go back to where we were before. What we knew before is gone and done and dusted. Fabulous, guys. Terrific. I'm going back to the slides now. So where previously, when we asked organizations about remote working, because I've believed in remote working for the longest time ever, these are the kind of excuses that we got. But these are not real excuses. These are excuses that come from process problems and from communication problems. They're not real solutions to real excuses or looking for a solution. So what is remote work? It's any kind of work that doesn't have to or can't be performed in a traditional office, anywhere in the world, whether you're at home, in transit, and access to preferably high-speed internet. And that we are all finding out is really important. So I just need to tell you, I'm actually working still on my ADSL modem. We've got a Vodacom network where I stay, but it is down, so it's up and down a bit like a yo-yo. And when we have load shedding, the local tower goes down, and so we have no access. So I've stayed with ADSL for now, anyway. Then there are two sides of remote workforce. There's the leadership side and there's the employee side. So leaders need to learn a different style of management. And by style of management, I'm talking about the different styles that we learn when we do leadership training. Your autocratic leader, your transactional leaders, etc. And that is different to a way of managing. So we need to have a different style of management as well as a different way of managing. We need different communication, different information, different ways, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We need to understand how to engage and motivate from a distance. We'll be talking about that in one of the future sessions. And we need to be able to manage the product and the service delivery, which is one of the biggest concerns of management. From an employee point of view, they need a different way of working, a different discipline, and it's a hard self-discipline working from home. Or what different ways of communicating, of how to overcome loneliness, both social and intellectual loneliness, and how to deal with distractions. So our challenges, we had a look at a number of challenges. Face-to-face interaction. So managers miss being able to manage people face-to-face, and people feel that their managers are becoming too remote in a remote environment. So how do we bridge that? Communication, which we're talking about today. Social isolation. How do they keep in touch with their team, their friends in the office? We're going to be talking in a minute about the virtual cooler. Fragmented team communication. How do we haul these things together? So these are the challenges that people are feeling. Lack of visibility. They feel that their managers are not seeing them and they're not getting to do maybe the challenging jobs. They're not getting the opportunities to progress themselves because of lack of visibility. How do we overcome that? Fear of missing out, similar sort of thing. Finding a creative outlet. So in the workplace, we have this intellectual challenge with the people that we work with. How do we overcome that at home, in the work from home environment? Time management. Lots of distractions that happen at home. How do you manage your time around those? And it becomes difficult because it is different. It's difficult to separate your work and personal life at home, creating that work-life balance in a home office environment. Access to information, and that's a big one because organizations are always worried about the confidentiality of their information, the security of the information, and we will be talking about that not today, but in a future episode specifically. Technology. What technology do we use, and how do we interface that technology with the technology that we have in the workplace at the moment? Then managing engagement and focus. We've spoken about that, and it really becomes really important as well as keeping morale up. How do we do that? Skills development. Just because we're working remotely doesn't mean we don't need skills development and opportunities to grow. So how do we achieve all of those things? And then, as we said, keeping track of progress. So we've put this under 3 headings. Communication, so that's what we're talking about today. Systems, process, and tools, we'll be talking about that at a future episode. And lastly, the goal management, what Ryan was talking about. We've set KPIs, and I'll put my hand up. I'm not a great believer in KPIs, so I'll put my hand up on that one right now, and we'll talk about it controversially when we get to that session. So, what is the one thing, my next question, what is the one thing that is your greatest challenge right now with managing a remote workforce? What's your one greatest challenge that you feel right now is holding you up or you need help with? Accountability, cool. That's going to come up under our goal management. Anybody else? Accountability, we've got IT challenges. Yeah, it's a big one. Introducing a normal schedule of working hours. Remote work allows for personal time. Absolutely. So what is normal? Home infrastructure. Okay, back to that technology. We'll look at some of it today. We'll look at the technology as it relates to communication today. Okay, I'm going back to the slides. Look at more of those a bit later. So we came up with this remote worker framework. Communication. What needs to be communicated? Why? When? To whom? How? Are all part of the communication part and what we really are talking about today. Systems and processes, how they need to change to be able to cope with a remote workforce and to be able to still get the same or better results. Most organizations that get this right actually get better results at the end of the day. Their people are more productive, the costs are reduced. So how do we all get that? How do we achieve that? And then goal management, and that's where your accountability comes in. And all of this sits within this cloud of psychological safety, trust, engagement, and motivation. Because if we cannot build psychological safety, if we cannot build trust between ourselves and our employees working remotely, if we cannot engage and motivate, we're not going to get it right. So no matter how good we are at the rest of the stuff that sits in the middle, if we don't get that around the outside, we're not going to get things right. And those are the things that Sue is really specifically dealing with. So remote worker tools, and I've divided them into 4 categories. So we've got staying in touch, staying productive, staying safe. That's when we talk about data security and things like that. And the remote workstation. What do we need on the remote workstation and who pays for it? Today we're doing staying in touch. So staying in touch, what is communication? I'm not going to read these out to you. These are various definitions that I come up with. So what I like to do when I'm presenting, I like to look at different definitions of the topic and then come up with a definition that I like for this particular presentation today. So I looked at these as well as some others, and I said, communication is transferring information using verbal, nonverbal, including speech, writing, graphical, signs, signals, and behaviors, and includes our emotions. One of the big things when we don't have face-to-face is we lose that emotional communication. The cultural situation, we have to become far more culturally aware in remote worker communication. The medium that we're using, and that's why the medium that we use becomes really important. We can't use one size fits all. And even our location, although our location right now is remote. So this is my definition of what communication is for this particular presentation. And then, what is communication? And this I found really interesting. Communication is a bridge between the communicator and the communicate. It's this bridge that sits in the middle between the two. And it's a process of telling, listening, and understanding that carries on until the communicate understands what the communicator is wanting to communicate, that the communication has happened, the understanding has happened. Too often, and I see it more often than I really would like to guess at even, people think we're communicating when we're type out an invoice, and the minute we press that send button, we think we've communicated, but we haven't. Because we haven't looked at the communicate. We haven't said, do they understand what I'm saying in this? Is that understanding, has that bridge of understanding been crossed? So when we press the send button, that's not the end of our communication. That's only the beginning of the communication. We have to follow up, find out was it communicated? Really important for remote working. So what gets communicated? And I'm going to ask you if you've got any other ideas of what gets communicated. So certainly work allocation, how we allocate work needs to do. How we do things, how to do things needs to be communicated. Queries, the why, when, what, where, who, how. All those kind of things are what we need to communicate from a work perspective. The status of work, being able to give feedback, constructive feedback, really important. Constructive feedback is one of the most important forms of feedback in remote worker. We need to give our employees opportunities for grievances, complaints, and difficulties that they're finding in their remote work. And of course, we need to communicate company, department, and team information. So I did work for an organization that was undergoing a massive change, massive structural change. And it's not a small organization. They had about 10,000 odd employees. Their communication was twofold. One, via email, and two, via the corporate website portal. That's not communication. And a year or two down the track, everything fell apart at the seams because nobody had bought into what they were trying to achieve. So we can't think that a company portal and email is the communication we need. We have to think of the what, when, why. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Personal information, well-being and home issues. How are the people doing at home? How are they coping at home? What other things can we be doing to help them in that remote work environment? And personal issues between them. How are their friends doing? They want to know how their friends are doing. They want to be able to communicate that virtual water cooler. Social communication and external, so who's talking with clients and how we're doing this, because a lot of our clients are also in lockdown. And of course, meetings. Formal meetings, informal meetings, and impromptu meetings. Those are much more difficult to do, especially the impromptu meetings in a remote environment. So the things we need to look at. What, why, who, when, where, how. So what needs to be communicated? Why? To whom? When is the best time to do it? Where are they when we are doing this communication? And therefore, how should we be doing it? Really important. Every single bit of communication needs to go through that thought process. Time sensitivity. Is it really important that we communicate it today, or will tomorrow do? Or is it better if we communicate it tomorrow because something else is happening today? So time sensitivity. Confidentiality and its opposite, inclusivity. So who do we communicate to, and how much confidentiality is required in that communication? And we will guide what communication we use based on confidentiality and inclusivity. Context. Meetings or private sessions. Right, my next question. What other things do you need to communicate about at this time? So I've listed some of the things, but what other things are you actually finding you're having to communicate at this time? One thing I didn't add on the list is COVID-19 information. So who feels that it's an organizational responsibility to talk about COVID-19? Oh, yeah, Natalie, that's when the organization has to decide how they're going to support that. One team member who has zero internet connectivity and relies solely on data, maybe the company needs to buy the data. I've got another client that I'm just starting to work with now, but they've got people all over Africa and in some really remote areas, and they consider it their responsibility to make sure that they have the appropriate connectivity in those areas. Training employees on new tech, yeah, absolutely. And you'll see later on in my tips. It's not only employees that need to be changed, Yolanda, but managers need to be changed. Well done, Natalie. Self-help, absolutely. Okay, I'm going back to the presentation now. So, staying in touch, collaboration tools. When we're looking at collaboration tools, this is how do we get people to work together and collaborate in their working environment the same way as they were working in the office environment. They need to be able to brainstorm ideas, ask each other questions, pass files backwards and forwards, compare notes on the progress and keep track of each other and their progress, and then act as the virtual water cooler. One organization said between 10 and 10:30, we're opening up the general channel as a virtual water cooler. And in that time, anybody can come and go, so people can enter and leave as they want, can talk about what they want, can look at who is at the water cooler, can have a conversation with anyone else there or take their own conversation offline if they want to. But they have this virtual water cooler environment. And the technology examples that we give are Slack. And Slack is probably at the moment one of the most popular ones. MS Teams, River and Flock. River and Flock are lesser known, but they also provide quite a lot of functionality. Then meetings and chat tools. So with meetings and chat tools, we need to be able to meet virtually. Hold your daily team check-ins, and we're going to be talking about that in our process episode in quite a lot of detail. How do we do these daily check-ins? Because we can learn a lot from the agile world when we're doing this. One-off calls that we may be needed through the day, or holding meetings and conferences and brainstorming. I have a colleague who I live in Somerset West, and my colleague lives in Milnerton Way, and on Bloberg, Milnerton, in that area. And I WhatsApp her to say, can we talk? And she'll come back and say, give me 5 minutes. And I'll give her 5 minutes, and then we both get onto Zoom. And we have the chat that we want to chat about, and then end it. So we use the different technologies to find out if we can have a chat. It's like knocking on a door. WhatsApp, knocking on the door. Can we have a quick chat? Give me 5 minutes, okay? And then we get on and talk. So the examples of that are Zoom, which we're using now, Skype, Google Hangouts. I think Zoom is by far the most popular. And I read an article yesterday that said that the British government is now using Google for virtual parliamentary sessions using Zoom. So can't be too much wrong with Zoom if that's happening. Customer support. Issuing support tickets, assigning tickets. You might already have this, but your customer support people are going to be at home. So they need to either have your functionality in your systems at home, or you need to find another way. And the other way could be this little app called Groove. You can Google any of these and have a look at them and see. Personally, I use Slack and I use Zoom a lot. So, tips for communicating with remote workers. I think this line needs to be a mantra. Communicate often, communicate appropriately, and communicate quickly. I think we can learn a lesson from what our own president has been doing with his communication, albeit that he's arrived at a couple of the meetings late. But he's been doing things quickly, he's been reacting quickly, and I think that has helped us be as successful as we have been so far at controlling the coronavirus. However, of course, it's killing the economy at the moment. And that's where we come in with all of this. It's how do we get back into the economy using remote tools. Be very careful with what you say. Some people are sensitive about some words, and I know I am not the most tactful person. I am inclined to be very practical and very pragmatic and say what I think. I have to be more careful when I'm working remotely with people. I can't be that. I have to be more sensitive about their needs. Use video communication rather than just a telephone or a cell. But people like to see other people. They like to see them, get their facial emotions in their face, see what they're wearing, etc., etc. Create a virtual water cooler. Create a time and a place where your employees can get together around a virtual water cooler. And experiment. Experiment, experiment, experiment. We're not going to get this right first time. None of us is going to get it right first time. Experiment. What works, what doesn't work. And we're going to be talking about that again in the process session that we do. Sense of belonging. Remote workers feel remote from the organization. How do we create a sense of belonging in what we're doing? I see my ADSL is playing up a bit. Hopefully it survives. Prioritize employee relations and engagement efforts. So prioritize engaging employees. Getting them and keeping them engaged and motivated is more important than keeping them productive. Productivity is important, but right now you will achieve productivity through engagement. So prioritize engagement. Efficient collaboration. Make sure they have the tools they need for efficient collaboration. And we've spoken about Slack and others. Some of you might be Microsoft workplaces and will have MS Teams available. But Slack, for instance, is free for certain things and certain number of people and certain channels that you can have on it. Put relevant information at their fingertips. Understand the information that they need and find ways to put it there. And we'll be talking about that when we talk about staying safe. And empower those remote workers. Don't micromanage. Don't feel that you have to sit on their shoulders. Don't micromanage. We're going to be talking about daily check-ins in the process episode. Ways to be able to communicate, get information from the employees on what they're doing, how they're doing, what they're delivering on, but empower them to actually do the work. Don't sit on their shoulders. And offer career development opportunities. People leave organizations today. The number one reason that people leave organizations today is for the lack of career development. We need to put career development back as a priority in organizations. How we do that. And then train your managers. We don't only have to train the remote workforce, and that we can do, but train your managers. Train your managers to be better at managing a remote workforce. So these are my final questions for today. What tools are you using for staying in touch? What was the one thing you learned today? And what can you commit to in terms of staying in touch with a remote workforce? So what tools are you using for staying in touch? What was the one thing you learned today? And what can you commit to in terms of staying in touch with your remote workforce? Zoom and MS Teams, interesting. Teams, Monday.com, WhatsApp, Teams, lots of MS people on this. Skype for Business, well, that comes with Microsoft. Zoom, FaceTime, really? Mobile phone, yeah. MS Team, WhatsApp, Skype for Business. Trello, yay, I see someone's using Trello. We're going to be talking about that in process. Do not micromanage. I agree with you. Do not micromanage. Building the bridge of understanding. Love that, Rania. So important. Virtual pub quiz. Nice, Lujan. Daily check-ins are a must. Absolutely they are, but it's how you do them. And we're going to be covering that in the process session. Okay, I am going to stop the chat, closing the loop on communication. Really good, Yolanda, yeah. Staying in touch, not only on work matters. Absolutely, Christian, absolutely. Okay, I'm getting out of the chat and I am getting out of the sharing. If anybody would like any more information, you can have a look on the Talent Line website. I sent out a fabulous little blog yesterday it was just an article that I read on an organization that's doing like a TV show for their staff, but they do it for themselves and they interview each other. Lovely. Read it if you can. Ryan, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it back to you for any questions. Right.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Gail. Really appreciate that. Yeah, some interesting insights. So thanks for that. I mean, I found something quite interesting that 91% of everyone surveyed in your statistics in the beginning have experienced some form of disruption as a result of COVID-19. So that's quite substantial. 91% is quite a big number. I think let's open the Q&A. If anyone has any questions you'd like to pop over into the Q&A, please feel free to do so, or you can put that into chat as well. But I think Q&A probably works a little bit better for questions that you might have. Gail, while we're waiting for people to sort of, just get their heads around that and type up any questions, I'll kick it off as usual. Something that I've been finding quite interesting is a lot of us use freelancers or remote, part-time contractors and things like that. And are there any tips with respect to differences in managing remote freelancers or remote contract workers who are perhaps on an hourly basis versus managing your permanent staff?
Okay. My opinion is no, there isn't. And it does largely depend on where you get them from. I know that some of the contract houses like to keep their employees feeling as though they're part of their organization. But I know that a lot of contractors really feel much more aligned with the organization that they're working with. My personal feeling is we should be managing our remote workers the same as we manage our own personal staff. They should have the same goals. A lot of organizations put their contract workers through their own training as well, train them. They don't rely on their contract house to train them. So yeah, my personal belief is treat your contract workers the same, and from a remote working perspective, probably even more so. Yeah.
And I guess it's about managing deliverables and not managing time, which is what it should really have been all along when you're a knowledge worker. You know, we're not clocking in with hourly cards and things like that.
Yeah. But a lot of managers still manage on the basis of, is Gail sitting at her desk?
Yeah.
If she is, she must be working. So when I was programming, I became a master of avoiding work. I found that when I was writing programs, we still had card decks. And I found if I could walk around the office with a deck of cards in my hand, everybody thought I was working. So presence is not an indication of work.
Well, these days, if you are logged into a webinar, then people assume you're working, right? So,
well, hopefully we are helping people to do that.
Okay, I'm not sure if you're seeing any questions on your side, Gail. I think
I just saw one question from the lady who said, "Thank you for the daily tips. Can we apply these tips when engaging clients?" Well, why not? You know, but I would be just a little bit more selective with clients. You want to be a lot more personal with your people that you're working with than you really want to be with your clients.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to say you're going to be impersonal with your clients, but the people that work for you need a different kind of relationship with you. I mean, I love Richard Branson's one little quote that said, "Look after your people and they will look after your customers." And I'm a firm believer in that. Look after your people and they will look after your customers.
Yolanda,
Yolanda, you're gone. If you're gone, have a lovely day. Hope you have a lovely day too. Thank you so much for being here. Any other questions, guys, on communication?
I guess you communicated your message really well.
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay, I think that was fantastic. Let me just check. I see something coming through on chat. Okay, yeah, that's it. I think let's wrap it up. Just a few takeaways from me. Thank you very much, Gail. Really appreciate your time and your insights today, and looking forward to the follow-up episodes. You know, it's a little bit different to how we would normally do things. Normally, I think as Accelerate, we would cover sort of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But webinars definitely, I think, shorter inserts and more frequent episodes seem to be a lot more comfortable for people, and so I definitely look forward to the follow-up episodes in your segment. But just a few quick takeaways for me today was that, you know, the move to remote working just based on the chat is very much underway. You know, a lot of people sort of saying close to 100% of their people will be working remotely post this. I think certainly that is quite accurate. A lot of people have realized immense value from sort of remote working teams. And, you know, we can sift through the complexity of that and increasingly get better at it. But certainly there are already some profound efficiencies and value being realized. I think for me, you know, with respect to communication and what you were talking about today, there are issues related not only to the organization, but also to the individual, which are absolutely critical, and which leaders have to take more and more of a responsibility for. You know, before, I think, you know, you expect people to show up to the office and you're not too concerned about what their current mental state is and what's happening in their lives and whether they got to their yoga class and found an outlet for creativity and things like that. You just expect that when they show up, they switched on and they're ready to sort of hit the road running. And I think now as leaders, you take far more of an interest and far more of a care towards the personal circumstance of all of your employees, beyond just the organizational concerns. And you know, these are things like FOMO, social isolation, creative outlets, mental health, which is increasingly important, and so on. But then also the business issues, you know, systems, KPIs, time management, and all of those lovely things that we'll get to in the next session. I really like what you were saying about communication with respect to building this bridge of understanding, and communication really being about the flow of relevant, timely information, and how we start getting more efficient and better at that. So clearly, communication is an absolutely critical success factor during this time, and particularly as we work with our remote teams. So thank you very much, Gail, for taking us through that, and for stimulating some thought and ideas in that space. We're really looking forward to sort of closing out that section and really understanding some of the other subtleties around performance management and keeping people motivated and locked in and all of that. So yeah, I think there's lots for us to learn. There's lots coming up, so please do check in and keep visiting our website for updates and so on. And obviously we'll keep inviting all of you to these sessions, and we hope to see all of you and many more of you at upcoming sessions. So keep well, stay safe, and we look forward to engaging you more and more as